What's going on, guys? Blood Moon Bobby here, and unfortunately, I have some really sad news to report to you guys tonight. Microsoft co founder Paul Allen died of cancer at age 65 due to complications of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. His current philanthropy company, Vulcan Inc., announced his passing on Twitter today. Now, I'll be totally honest, I'm a person who's learned a lot about several tech company leaders, founders, CEOs over the last several years, like Steve Jobs, Satoru Iwata, Hiroshi Yamauchi, and so forth. And to be really honest, I knew very little about Paul Allen leading up to until I learned about the announcement tonight. This video, by the way, I'm going to be going off of a few notes, but there's not going to be much of a script for me to go on, only because I really want to be as genuine as possible. But I honestly didn't know much about Paul Allen, so I did quite a bit of research before I started making this video, and you're not going to see me on camera only because I wanted to concentrate this video on as much on Allen as I possibly can. So I figured, since now I know all this information about Allen, I figured you guys out there probably don't know much aside from, oh, he's the guy who co-founded Microsoft with Bill Gates. Like, Bill Gates, he's like easily one of the most famous people out there, and given that Allen himself felt uncredited. I think towards the end, he and Gates were overall friends, but he kind of felt uncredited for his work when he was at Microsoft in its early days, so I figured I'd go over some historical points here. So, Bill Gates and Paul Allen founded Microsoft in 1975. In fact, it's even reported in a memoir that it was Allen who encouraged Gates to drop out of college in order to start this company, and Allen intended to start Microsoft to create software for a new generation of personal computers, which little did he know back then that would come to be probably one of the biggest understatements in the tech industry, because as I'm sure a lot of you guys know, whether you use a PC, Mac, or Linux, if there was no Microsoft, there would probably be no computer industry that's anywhere as big as today. And when he was there, Allen said that he was responsible for he naming the company Microsoft, and he created the two-button mouse, which I will say, even though I've switched to Mac, that's one of the things I actually kind of miss about Mac. I mean, yes, there's secondary click on Mac, but in terms of what was the company that had started the right-click phenomenon, I'm clicking the right-click button on my wireless mouse. It was Microsoft. And he also arranged for the company to buy an OS called QDOS, which, as the name implies, would eventually be renamed by Allen and Gates as MS-DOS. And Allen was considered the idea man between him and Gates was considered more so the man of action. And he left Microsoft in 1983. He said in his memoir part of it was because he felt underappreciated, and also he was leaving at a time when he was being treated for Hodgkin's lymphoma, but he remained at the company as a board member until the year 2000. And unfortunately, it sounds like Allen had health problems throughout much of his adult life. But the part I really got to give Allen a ton of credit for, I mean, what he did at Microsoft, some of these things I just told you about are game-changing. But what I really wanted to tell you guys about is, what did he do after his time at Microsoft? Because you would think, okay, he's probably, even if he's just a board member, he's still gonna get a ton of money just because he was the co-founder of Microsoft. But actually, he had quite a bit on his plate after he left Microsoft. He started several other companies. Like, he founded the Allen Institute for Brain Science in 2003, a nonprofit aiming to give scientists tools and data needed to probe how the brain works. And he also founded the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, the Allen Institute for Cell Science, and the Paul G. Allen Frontiers Group. So he had his hand in quite a few science industries, and he also was owner of a couple sports teams. Like, he was the owner of the NBA's Portland Trailblazers team and the NFL's Seattle Seahawks, and he had a stake in the Seattle Sounders soccer team. So I have a quote here from NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, and he said that Allen, quote, worked tirelessly to identify new ways to make the game safer and protect our players from unnecessary risk. And then NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said Allen, quote, helped lay the foundation for the league's growth internationally in our embrace of new technologies. So I'm honestly just beyond words because I'm just finding out all about this in the last hour. So Allen definitely made a really large impact, not just as a person who, started Microsoft and had several of its key ideas. I'm sure there's many others that I will eventually find out, but he also got his handprints all over the science and sports industries, and I'm really floored when I get to hear that a leader of a company or a founder of a company goes off and gets their hands into different industries. It kind of makes them feel more, for lack of a better word, and I know I sound kind of cheesy, but it kind of makes them sound human because, as people, we have multiple interests. We're not just fixated on one thing, or, what I'm saying? Like, we're not just like, the person who may be into computers, you may also be into other things. So I think it's really cool that I got to find out that Allen also got his hands into things like health science and sports, and I definitely feel I'm not sure if Allen himself would realize this, but I hope he knows that he's definitely made a really large impact. I'm pretty sure even bigger than he could have ever expected. And I do have a quote here from Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates himself, and it says, quote, I am heartbroken by the passing of one of my oldest and dearest friends, Paul Allen. From our early days together at Lakeside School through our partnership in the creation of Microsoft to some of our joint philanthropic projects over the years, Paul was a true partner and dear friend. Personal computing would not have existed without him. But Paul wasn't content with starting one company. He channeled his intellect and compassion into a second act focused on improving people's lives and straightening communities in Seattle and around the world. He was fond of saying, quote, if it has the potential to do good, then we should do it. That's the kind of person he was. Paul loved life and those around him, and we all cherished him in return. He deserved much more time, but his contributions to the world of technology and philanthropy will live on for generations to come. I will miss him tremendously. And Allen himself said in a previous article that when he talked about, what he hopes his legacy will be after his passing, he said that, quote, a big part of my own financial legacy is allocated to this kind of work for the future. In the article, it was talking about how he got into studying the brain, at the Allen Institute for Brain Science. And I wanted to leave off on this one quote, and I would just like to say, when in the previous quote, when he was saying that a big part of his financial legacy is linked to his work for the future, I'm sure it'll be tremendously felt. And there was one quote, if you go to the Vulcan website, the philanthropic organization that announced his death, if you go to the website, there's a quote there that says, and I think it's from Paul Allen himself, quote, as long as we work together I think it's kind of jumbled up and they got it a bit misworded. Quote, I'll try it again. As long as we work together with both urgency and determination, there are no limits to what we can achieve. So really hope, so I just wanted to end off saying really glad, because that's the thing I realized when after a CEO passes. I don't know if it's just coincidence for me, but in my case, after great people like Satoru Iwata, Steve Jobs, and Hiroshi Yamauchi, after they passed away, I feel like I started to learn much more about them. Maybe it's because when they passed, news organizations, I don't want to say take advantage, but, they come out with articles talking about how they lived their life, how they got to where they got to, the friends they made, the enemies they had, so on and so forth. So I'm really glad I got to share all this information with you guys. And to Paul Allen, I would just like to say a a thank you for starting one of the most influential companies in the computer industry. I mean, I may have switched over to a a MacBook Pro, but it's not. It can't be understated how influential Microsoft is on the computer industry today. I mean, in, as I've said previously in this video, without a Microsoft, the computer industry, even like you, even though somebody said, "Oh, what about Apple?" But it's really Microsoft, in my opinion, that made computers as big as they are today. I remember I used an IBM computer that ran Windows 98 when I was a kid. I used to play computer games on that, and then when I went to elementary school, I learned how to use Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint. Even though it was on a Mac, I will say it was still Microsoft programs, and that was basically the start of me starting to learn more about computers. And when I got into movie making, I was using in Windows 7, 8, and 10 machines using Windows Movie Maker before I started learning to use programs like Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro. So I can't say that, regardless of how much you consider, how much of Paul Allen's, how much you think Paul Allen made an impact. Like, he started the company and had many of its ideas, and I'm sure many of the things that I learned through the years wouldn't have been possible without Paul Allen. So I would just like to say thank you, Paul. Thank you for starting one of the most influential computer companies in the industry, and I hope you can sit back somewhere and realize that you've made a tremendous impact that many millions of people will feel, even if they can't explain it. It's because of you. You started a company and made computers much more approachable, and it's now one of the most essential things to have in your household next to your TV and refrigerator. So thank you, Paul, so much, and you will be deeply missed.